Can I begin by thanking the LMC for its leadership in relation to this and bringing people together. Very much has my support, and I'm very appreciative. I'm very pleased to see so many people here. Last night I was with pharmacists looking at the development of healthy living pharmacies, and there was a lot of people in the room again. So it is great to see so many people committed to thinking through change and ideas and listening to what lessons we can learn from elsewhere. I spent 4 years out of politics as a headhunter between 1997 and 2001, courtesy of the electorate in Bury North that gave me a holiday at that time from politics. And being a headhunter and working with some very big companies about the cross-transference of ideas between public sector and private sector, I found quite fascinating. Public sector reform is difficult. It's difficult because there are cultures and expectations embedded, and all too often the negatives can seem insuperable. What's changed in recent years is, I think, a development of thought which has partly come from private sector, but also come from people working within the public sector itself to say we can do something different and we can do something better. There is a problem with politicians. Firstly, we're seen as opponents rather than proponents of things. And every time we try and do something, the argument is always, well, you're only doing this to save money. When, by and large, in my experience on both sides of the house, that isn't true. And we have to work with people who credit us with wanting to move culture in a direction that benefits the people and the patients and those that we're working for, as well as helping the system cope with the pressures that it's under. And sometimes that drive can only be helped by people on the inside who say there's a new way of looking at this. These financial pressures are real. The politicians aren't just saying it for the sake of it, but work with it, because ultimately patients are the most important. Culture matters. I was Parliamentary Private Secretary to Kenneth Baker when he began education reforms. And one of the big issues we had to deal with was the low expectation of teachers of their pupils. In some of the most disadvantaged areas, the low expectations of teachers themselves was holding back reforms because there was a sense we can't do anything any different. In the NHS you can sometimes get that as well. Julie Moore made the speech recently, and she was making the point that sometimes because of our interference, if you're an NHS manager, all you need to do is sit there for a couple of years and the next initiative will come along and the last one gets dropped away and you don't really need to have done anything. And she was making that point, not me. And we know there's a certain amount of truth in it. Our side of it is to make sure that we stay out of it a bit. As Minister in the Department of Health, I'm acutely aware now of what it is I can't do, because the NHS runs in a much more autonomous organisation. Ministers can no longer direct. I sometimes get frustrated because I don't mind the system having become more our NHS than my or the government's NHS. That's great, providing our NHS actually delivers and decisions are made. I've been very frustrated in some of the areas that I've worked in because decision making in the NHS just takes too long. And whatever it is you want to do or are enthused about here, at the end of it, a decision will have to be made. Life can be very comfortable not making them and just moving things on a bit, but ultimately, if this is to be our NHS, and if patients' expectations are to be managed, then they've got to see that there's real delivery from the people responsible. And I got the sense that your engagement here indicates you're absolutely on that page. Narration matters, making sure there's a constant stream of information to people so that they're engaged, and then the decision making must flow as a result of that. But I found this very interesting. Perhaps one thing I would bring out most of all that is involved in my work in integration and everything else, the one bucket idea. Absolutely. I cannot tell you how frustrating it is to talk to people from different parts of the country who would like to do more, but are working in a situation where people are protecting their budget. It's not their budget. It's all our budget. And if it's not used effectively, we are not delivering for the people who matter most to us. Anything you can do to work with people to say, put that aside, be working collectively and make sure this resource is used for everybody, that would be great. Finally, and not wishing to abuse my time, but I must be very clear about this, If you want the sort of investment and the growth that we've been able to see, the recent GP 4-year forward view, the advance in relation to that, if you want what Simon Stevens is talking about, make sure we stay in the EU. Because if you want the economy, and I'm not meaning to tread on any toes, I think it's a big decision, there are different ways of looking at it, but there's a right way and there's a way that I think isn't right. And I'm absolutely committed. If you want the economy to go through the floor and have life much more difficult over the next few years, it's very clear, if the public vote to leave the EU, that's what will happen. But anything you can do in the next 48 hours to persuade anyone you know that actually, for the good of the NHS, backed by Royal Colleges, backed by the BMA, backed by all the so-called experts who've now been derided. I'm sure none of you are experts who expect to be derided in your walk of life. But if we want to see the sort of growth and investment and the positive look at the future, then I do want you to vote for hope, not fear, and I want you to vote and stay in the EU. Thank you very much.